Afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Supradeep Das, and I am a research intern at the Institute of Chinese Studies, New Delhi. On behalf of the ICS, I welcome you to today's Wednesday seminar, Chinese Calculations in Tibet and India's Options. I am delighted to welcome you to today's seminar. Today's discussion focuses on one of the most significant and sensitive dimensions of India-China relations, the Tibet question. While Tibet has long occupied a central place in China's strategic thinking, recent developments, including intensified border infrastructure construction, increased military activity along the line of actual control, the proposed mega dam on the Yarlung Tsangpo Brahmaputra, and the continuing issue of the Dalai Lama succession, have brought renewed attention to reassess India's options vis-à-vis Tibet. At a time of polarizing debates and global strategic dynamics are undergoing rapid change, can there be a third way to approach the Tibet question? Drawing upon Chinese language sources, academic research, and journals produced in various Chinese universities, today's presentation seeks to explore China's vision for Tibet, the challenges it faces in governing the region, and the implications of these developments for India. The speaker for today's seminar is Ms. Antara Ghoshal Singh. She is a fellow at the Strategic Studies program at the Observer Research Foundation, New Delhi. Her area of research includes China-India relations, China-India-US triangle, China in South Asia, Chinese foreign policy, China's domestic development, among others. She is a graduate from Tsinghua University School of Public Policy and Management, People's Republic of China, and has been a Chinese language fellow at National Central University, Taiwan. Prior to ODEF, she has worked at the Center for Social and Economic Progress, New Delhi, Delhi Policy Group, National Maritime Foundation, Manohar Parrikar Institute of Defense Studies and Analysis, and has a list of publications in national and international peer-reviewed journals, magazines, and newspapers. Before starting her career in academics, she has worked as a journalist with the Times of India and the Deccan Chronicle Group. The chair for today's seminar is Dr. Sherin Chonzom Bhutia. She is an associate professor at the Center for East Asian Studies, School of International Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University. Prior to her current position, Dr. Bhutia served as an associate editor, India Quarterly, for a period about 5 years. Alongside, she was advisor at Unit for International Cooperation, National Institute of Educational Planning and Administration. And before that, she spent considerable time as an associate fellow at the ICS. Her areas of interest include negotiation theory, Sino-Tibetan negotiation, domestic sources of China's foreign and security policy, and China's nationalist policy, among others. She has written and spoken on these issues at various national and international forums. Now, before I hand over to the chair, I would like to request all the participants to follow a few housekeeping rules. All participants shall be muted during the seminar. Questions may be posted in the chat box along with your name and affiliation. Alternatively, you may also use the raise your hand option during the interactive session. You shall then be called upon to unmute yourself and ask your questions. I now hand over to the chair. Over to you, Dr. Bhutia. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for having me also today to chair the session, and I'm grateful to ICS and to Alka ma'am for thinking of me. Good afternoon to everyone. It is my honor and pleasure to chair this session today. We have Dr. Antara Ghoshal Singh with us, who is going to be speaking on a topic that is of great interest to many of us, I believe. And she has been researching on China's domestic and foreign policy issues for a very long time, which is evident from the bio that was read out just now. And I think most importantly, her knowledge of Mandarin Chinese places her in a very strong position to understand Chinese policy objectives and narratives vis-a-vis the topic that we are discussing today, which is Chinese calculations in Tibet and India's options. I don't want to preempt the presentation, hence I will just keep my remarks very brief. From my reading of the abstract, Dr. Singh has rightly identified some of the key activities that are being carried out by the Chinese government in Tibet. All of these are concentrated on three key aspects, as she's mentioned, on building, settling, and naming, which is quite easy to remember actually. So building as in building of critical infrastructure, settling in terms of the settlement of population in these border villages, and then by naming, the references to the naming of places in Arunachal Pradesh, which Anna has been referring to as Nansang, South Tibet since 2007. So building, if you were to go into history of these activities, then it is clear that the emphasis on building part was present since the 1950s, whether it was regarding building of highways or railways or dams. And when it comes to settling of population on the Tibet India border areas, it is again generally understood as a recent phenomena dating to the second term of Xi Jinping. However, if we read Robert Barnett's important contribution, a detailed research which was published in the Foreign Policy, he discusses about how these villages date back to the Jiang Zemin era in mid 90s. So amongst these three of building and settling and naming, I think we could say that the naming of places in Arunachal, that is maybe the among the newer interventions that can be attributed to the Xi Jinping leadership. And this naming process started sometime around 2017 and continued in 2021, 23, 24. So about 4 iterations have taken place. Otherwise, so we can see that overall there is a continuity in Chinese building and settling activities in Tibet's border areas. And in fact, we can observe that in the last 14 years or so of Xi Jinping's rule, there is not just a continuity but an intensification in terms of China's Tibet policy during Xi's rule across all the domains of whether it's in the area of governance or infrastructure build-up or securitization, policy towards religion, and also lately also towards the nationality policy. So with regards to this nationality policy specifically, policy towards minorities now has shifted from just bringing out white papers to organizing work conferences, and now to a more binding law which has been issued in 2026 most recently. So with this background, I think the main thrust of Dr. Singh's presentation today, according to the abstract, is her proposal to offer an alternative, or what she calls a third way to approach the Tibet question. And she wants to do this because in her view, the current discourse in India is polarized into two sections. Hence, the presentation seeks to add nuance to India's current discourse on Tibet. And I think any kind of addition of nuance to the discourse is most welcome. And most importantly, what she's planning to do is she's going to be doing this through a study of Chinese language materials in academic journals and writings, etc., which I think is going to bring a crucial and addition to the debate and going to throw a very important light on the issue under discussion. It is not going to be an easy task, I think, given the underlying structural and dynamic factors that are impinging on India-China relations, but it is going to be a most needed and most important intervention. So this is most welcome and we are all looking forward to it. Additionally, I think given Dr. Singh's larger expertise on China-India-US relations, it would be interesting to also listen to Dr. Singh's analysis of what she terms in the abstract as the ongoing global turmoil, which all of us are witness to, and their salience to today's discussion, because this would help us to zoom out sort of and consider the larger global or regional structural determinants of India-China relations. So on this note, I hand over the floor to Dr. Singh, and really eagerly looking forward to listening to your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to present some of the research findings, that the researches that I have worked on for last couple of years, to share some findings from there. It is a privilege for me to be here at the ICS platform and, and talking to you. So thanks once again. And I was just talking to Professor Acharya that when she told me to explore the Tibet issue for today's talk, I was really nervous because the Tibet issue is so huge and so complex with so many facets involved, And if you see, this has been, the Tibet issue is being worked on by so many scholars, both in India and abroad. They have worked so much on this on this particular topic, So it is really, really difficult to say something different, to say something new to this topic. And we are all aware, actually. Okay, I would just request Akshat to share the presentation So can you please go to the first slide, please? Yes. So we all know very well that China is doing so many things, in Tibet. From constructing elaborate settlements to forward patrolling, to building critical infrastructure, to naming places within Tibet, also in India's Arunachal Pradesh. Then there is this dam project that they are doing that is again, raised so much concern in India about water security, about ecology, about the the Siliguri corridor. Apart from that, there is the Dalai Lama succession issue, which continue to challenge China-India relations. And of course, the fourth factor is the ongoing global turmoil that is happening, the changing dynamics of US-China great power competition, the rising tension in Taiwan Strait, and the talks of a possible US retrenchment to Western Hemisphere. So in this complex backdrop, understanding China's changing calculations in Tibet, I think is very, very important. Akshat, can you please change the slide? Um, as we know, the Tibet issue generates very strong and polarized debates within Indian strategic community. So you can very easily find this argument that, one section says that India needs to be more consistent, it needs to be more creative with its Tibet card, and it should play it in a way that, it can play the Tibet card in a more effective way against China. And in this respect, there is a lot of importance given to China's suppression of Tibetan community, Tibetan language, culture, or religion. And there is this. A lot of scholars would say that India should focus on these issues, and this will also help India to find common ground with other countries like the US or EU, who generally focus on these issues. And it would be better for India if India coordinates its stance on these issues with the other countries and then approach China collectively. So that is one point of view. Then you would also find views like, that China is way too strong right now, way too powerful, and India's Tibet card is not really a card, or its value is increasingly diminishing, and therefore it would be in best interest for India to not to confront China on the Tibet issue and try to assure China try to do away with all the mutual suspicion that exists because of the Tibet issue. So these are the two sets of arguments which you can very commonly find in India's strategic community. One shortcoming that I see in India's current discourse on Tibet is that it doesn't adequately feature the Chinese strategic thinking on Tibet, or the internal debates and discussions going on in China on Tibet beyond China's official statements or propaganda handouts and all those stuff. This could be attributed to the language barrier. This could also be because of lack of access to sources. There could be many reasons, but then there is this gap where the Chinese strategic thinking beyond its propaganda, which is easily available, that doesn't feature so much in our debates on Tibet. So to address this gap, I worked on a paper in 2022 for the Observer Research Foundation on China's strategic discourse on Tibet, based on study of Chinese language literature, particularly scanning Chinese social media, Chinese newspapers, think tanks, journal publications, university dissertations, and so on and so forth, to understand what China actually thinks on the issue, its vision and mission for Tibet, the challenges that it faces in implementing those mission and vision, and how I found it very interesting that India figures so prominently in almost all China's development plans for Tibet. And somehow all these factors are carefully concealed by China's propaganda machinery. So the idea for me was to look at the Tibet issue from a Chinese perspective, to understand what does China think about Tibet? What does it want to do with Tibet? And then, based on that analysis, I tried to add some nuance to the existing discourse that is there on Tibet. Akshat, can you please change the slide? So after going through the existing Chinese literature, what I find is that China do not really, see Tibet solely through the prism of internal security or Tibetan independence struggle like it used to do in 1950s or 60s. China's current vision on Tibet is not really, limited to a inward-looking or defensive role of safeguarding sovereignty and territorial integrity, or having Tibet as a national security barrier between China and India. Rather, what China wants, in fact, since early 2000s, is for Tibet to play a bigger, outward-looking, enterprising role where its closed or semi-closed borders are opened up for foreign economic and trade exchanges. Can you please change the slide, Akshat? So why is China seeking to lift this iron curtain on Tibet? In recent years, we have seen that the infrastructure-led growth model that China had designed for Tibet and also for overall China, for itself, that has somehow peaked, and the much touted double-digit growth rate for Tibet has somewhat disappeared. And there is this growing consensus in China that Tibet, as well as China's other Western provinces, must double down on looking west. And the need has become particularly stronger with intensifying China-US competition and the shrinking export market for Chinese goods. Like you are already aware of what is happening between China and the US with the tariff war, and with the export controls. So it is a very complicated situation there. Something of similar nature is also happening between China and EU, another big market for China. Every other week, you will find one new regulation being introduced by EU to deal with China's overcapacity problem, or the huge, exports that are being done by China at this point in time. So there is this a lot of tussle that is happening between China and EU as well. With us also, our economic ties have suffered after the 2020 Galwan clash. There have been new regulations introduced. So, China's export markets, in a way, China is facing challenges, or it is facing pressure from various quarters because of its huge trade surplus, because of its export-led economic model. So in such a situation, and this is this has been happening since last couple of years, and there has been this growing consensus within China that it needs to find newer market, it needs to look west. So there have been there have been a lot of discussions on these issues, and also there is this issue of coordinated development or common prosperity. So if you look at China's development, it's not really, its eastern part is way too developed than the western part. So western part in China, the western provinces have always been a laggard, and one of the reasons why there is this focus on coordinated development or common prosperity in recent days. So can you please change the slide? So now, since India is at the core of South Asia and it shares the longest border with Tibet, Tibet's opening up for foreign trade is if from a Chinese perspective, it is all about being able to access and benefit from the vast markets of India. However, as Tibet experienced social turbulence after the mid 1980s, the plan to open up Tibet to its neighborhood was put on hold for during that period of time. In November 1999, as China launched its Western development strategy, the idea of opening up Tibet once again got a lot of push from Beijing. In 2000, when China joined the WTO, and since then, the TAR government has been consistently highlighting its intention to construct a South Asia land trade corridor in almost every 5-year plan that it has come out with since early 2000s. In 2015, Tibet was made a part of China's Belt and Road Initiative. The focus was no longer on land trade, but on Tibet as a frontier for China's land-sea integration strategy that aims to connect the Pacific and the Indian Ocean with China as the hub. Of course, there have been a lot of debates going on within China whether incorporating Tibet in BRI is at all a good move. One view is that it is a rare opportunity for Tibet to develop itself, and it must seize this opportunity, as it comes to it. The other view is that Tibet must integrate itself more closely to the Chinese mainland first, and then through construction of Sichuan-Tibet corridor and other means, and after integrating itself more closely to China's interior, then it opens up and then it participates in BRI, and it opens up for foreign trade and foreign exchanges, so as to to avoid any source of instability which might arise from opening itself to the Western region. Akshat, can you please change the slide? In India, we might find the Chinese discourse rather absurd. Why would China want to have Tibet as a bridge between India and China, even as the 14th Dalai Lama and the Tibetan government in exile continue to function from India, from Dharamsala? But when you think from Chinese perspective, it makes perfect sense, because in Chinese assessment, there exist not one, but two sets of contradiction in Tibet. One is Tibet's unsustainable infrastructure-led development model, which has given rise to a low-efficiency dependency economy, which China sees as primary contradiction for Tibet, or TAR. And the second contradiction, they say, is the religious or the ethnic tension that with the Dalai Lama issue and all, as the secondary contradiction. And the Chinese conviction is that if the primary contradiction is addressed in an appropriate way, the secondary contradiction will automatically get sorted. And that's why this entire focus, if you look at Chinese writings, Chinese articles in, the Chinese academic articles, you will see that the entire focus is on economic development of Tibet, where it is lacking and how it can be dealt with better. One aspect is, of course, discussions on religious matters and all are. It is slightly again. China is a very in a way it's a restrictive society. You cannot openly discuss Tibetan religious things, and also that is because if you look at China's Chinese internet, you will really find any discussion on, say, Buddhism, or any discussion on the Dalai Lama. So it is in a way censored, in Chinese strategic circles. So you will see the entire focus of Chinese writing on economic development of Tibet, where it is lacking, why it is lacking, and how it can be overcome. Can you please change the slide, Akshat? So, as I just told you, the Chinese, according to the Chinese thinking, Tibet is being gradually prepared for this greater role that they have envisaged for Tibet. So first, by developing comprehensive transportation system combining highway, railway, and air transportation. Secondly, expanding the number, grade, custom clearance efficiency of ports. And thirdly, by building cross-border economic cooperation zones, border trade zones, and industrial parks. From that perspective, the 2020 border conflict came as quite a dampener for the Tibet enthusiasts within China. But in 2021, again, one of the authoritative Chinese document, that is China's 14th five-year plan and the long-term goals for 2035, reaffirmed that Tibet will remain a part of BRI and will be supported to build an important passageway to South Asia. Similarly, this year also I searched, and the suggestions of the CPC Central Committee on formulating the 15th five-year plan, they also adopted Tibet's, they also mentioned about how to leverage Tibet's locational potential by connecting Chinese inland with South Asian markets. I'm quoting here that they clearly mentioned that they want to leverage Tibet's locational potential by connecting Chinese inland, inland provinces in China with South Asian markets. So this confirmed that the Chinese government's long-term commitment to its policy of entering South Asia through Tibet. It's very intact, it's still there, and it is somehow not dependent on the ebbs and flows in China-India ties. So the Chinese vision is very much there, and it is gradually working on basis that vision. I will end my presentation with two examples. Can you please change the slide? First one is China's latest actions in Tibet, that is the formal starting of the construction of the $170 billion mega dam on Yarlung Tsangpo River, which becomes Brahmaputra after entering India. It is worth pondering that at a time when return on infrastructure investment in China is plummeting, and there is a slowdown in traditional infrastructure investment in China, and boosting consumption is the buzzword across China. Why is China undertaking such a massive infrastructure project? Is China investing such a huge money just to weaponize water and control India? Again, the annual power generation from this new mega dam is expected to be more than 300 billion kWh, almost thrice that of the Three Gorges project. But Three Gorges came at a time when China's industrialization was at its peak and it needed a lot of electricity. But now, when many traditional industries in China have reached saturation in electricity consumption, and China is carrying out anti-involution drives in various fields, in various industries, question automatically arises that who is expected to consume all that electricity generated by this huge dam project? Of course, no one can say for sure what China's real objective is, but such development does make sense when we look at it from the paradigm that we just discussed, that of China's long-term, long-held aspiration to enable Tibet to develop its pillar industries in tourism, in energy trade, in cross-border e-commerce, maintaining India as the primary market. And of course, as Tibet develops, it will further strengthen Tibet's role as the key supply center and the key security guarantor for China's future access to the Indian markets and interests in the Indian Ocean region. So that is one example where, where you can see how China is developing Tibet according to its own, according to the vision that I just discussed. Can you please change the slide, Akshat? The other example that I would like to add is the resumption of the Kailash Mansarovar Yatra. I wrote an article a couple of days back on this issue. The resumption of Kailash Mansarovar Yatra has been one of the landmark breakthroughs in India-China normalization process following the October 2024 Kazan summit. The development has been welcomed by both sides as an important sign of improving bilateral ties. China's interest in resuming the yatra is very clear. That that the yatra not only sustains cultural ties between the two countries, but also generates substantial economic benefit for the regional economy. Indian pilgrims reportedly spend around 12,000 yuan, around 3.7 times the amount spent by mainland Chinese tourists during the same period. And by some estimates, regional tourism revenue surged by nearly 300%. The pilgrimage is often seen as a stepping stone for advancing China's Western development strategy or fostering a positive environment for regional cooperation integration that China has envisaged for Tibet. However, as the yatra resumed in June 2025, I could see that it triggered a huge uproar in Chinese online spaces where people claimed that India is strengthening infrastructure near the mountain, near the the mountain pass under the guise of pilgrimage. While also asserting its own cultural sovereignty over China's sacred mountain and lake, and that China should neither encourage such exchanges nor expand the scale of yatra. The sentiment was not only just common people's public sentiment, but there were also very senior Chinese scholars and big established newspapers publishing those pieces. Very senior scholars writing those pieces and being published in mainstream newspapers. So, which means that this concern has been there in certain segments of Chinese rule makers. Now, I just noticed on April, right after, the MEA, the Ministry of External Affairs, issued a notice regarding the commencement of this year's yatra. 3 days later, Nepal raised objection to the yatra, saying that it goes through the Lipu Lake route, and that is part of Nepalese territory. While India rejected Nepal's objection to the yatra, China has maintained a studied silence. On the issue, you cannot find any official response to the development. Although Nepal has this time, sent the note to China as well, but China officially has not responded. But in domestic circles, it's very clear that China's stance is that they do not oppose Nepal's position, but it encourages Nepal to resolve the issue with India. So that is the the stance which is popular in domestic circles. So what I could see is that now we have a situation where India's new, I have just put a picture here. You can see India's new ambassador to China in Lhasa holding meeting with with very top TR officials regarding on-site inspection of the preparations of receiving Indian pilgrims. On the other hand, if you look at Chinese interest, you can see that there is this discourse going on how Kathmandu can put immense pressure on New Delhi by disrupting the functioning of the supply routes along the Yatra route, many of which passes through Nepal's western border. Well, can you connect these two incidents? It's difficult to say for sure, but then, if you put it in the paradigm that we just, discussed, where China would like to open up Tibet in a very cautious way, where it balances its security consideration with the openness in the sensitive region, even say through third countries. I mean, you can fit the developments in that kind of a paradigm, So we would have to, of course, wait and see how this progresses. But then, if you put it in this kind of a paradigm, it does make sense. So I will stop there, and maybe we can have more discussions during the question answer session. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Koshal. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay. I'm having a bit of a network issue. Actually, it's raining very heavily here in Shimla. So if there is any voice break, please let me know in between. So yeah, thank you, Dr. Goshal. I think this was a very interesting and also a very novel approach to understanding the whole discussion. Usually we are very used to looking at, whenever we are talking about the Tibet issue, or whenever we talk about the Tibet factor in India-China relations, or China's policy towards Tibet, whether it's in any domain, governance or Chinese policy with regards the security dimension, or religious policy, ethnic policy, nationality policy, we tend to look at it from a very traditional approach, and you've given us a very different perspective, and you've grounded this on very primary research, and I think that's what brings the novelty to this discussion. So what you also, I think, mentioned about the whole debates, the internal debates that are ongoing inside China, and with that I would also try to supplement it with a question in terms of how far back have these debates been going on, and what are still these debates? If you look at the opening up of Tibet in terms of so there have been writings. I mean, like I mentioned, Professor Robert Barnett has been working on this. He's looked at the trajectory of changes in China's policy towards Tibet. So in the 90s itself, when Tibet had the new party secretary, Chen Kuyan, who was quite a notable and a notorious party secretary at that time. So in the backdrop of all the protests that were ongoing in the 80s, the late 80s, so China finally decided that they're going to integrate Tibet into the larger Chinese market economy. And as a result, this opening up had begun at that point of time itself in the 90s, far back before the Western development strategy was implemented in the 2000s. So this has been ongoing for a very long time. So there is, we also read about it in terms of the literature that China has supplemented its policy towards Tibet with regards maintenance of stability, alongside a dual approach of also promoting development. So in that sense, this is a double kind of a thrust that has been ongoing, and in that sense there is continuity, if you look at it that way, in terms of the thrust of Chinese policy. So leveraging Tibet's location, the geo-economic aspect of it, in that sense there seems to be a continuity rather than a break, right? And then in that sense, these discussions and debates that are ongoing inside China, they may not be so removed from the policy framework in that sense. It's a dual track approach. On the one hand, you focus on security, you focus on maintenance of stability in the region, which is why when we allude to the statements of the President Xi Jinping himself, talks about Tibet as a national security screen, or when he talks about governing Tibet governing the country starts from its borders, governing borders starts from Tibet, maintaining the stability of Tibet, all of that, there is no contradiction in that sense, right? So I just wanted to get a sense in terms of your reading about these documents. You said that these are mainly, public intellectuals discussing in various journal articles. You also referred that these are also being discussed in the social media. So the first question would be, how far back have these discussions been going on? How intense are these discussions? What is the scale of these discussions? And how influential would these discussions be in terms of influencing policy? So are they emphasizing on a more singular kind of a focus on this kind of a opening, which then prioritizes opening rather than focusing on security, but or they are also acknowledging that we also need to emphasize security and we need to also take care of these other problems that are there, and then go on with these opening up. So I mean, that would just give us some sense about where they are going. And so yeah, I mean, primarily I want to begin with that question, and then I think we can also open up the floor to further questions in the audience. Yeah.
Yes, ma'am, you are actually absolutely right. There is this policy continuity, and the sources that I used for this paper is, I mean, it is also, it's not just the social media discourses, but, even government documents, which are primarily in Chinese. So most of them, I mean, most of the government documents that I saw since 2000, like you mentioned, since 2000, they have been this consistently, they have been highlighting about the South Asia corridor, about the land sea route, about opening up Tibet. So it is a very consistent policy that they are following, but you do not see this policy reference to this policy at all in any English language communication that comes from the Chinese side. You will never get to see like opening up Tibet through South Asia or a land sea corridor. At least I have not found it in say the English language material which is generally available to us. But in the Chinese language material, it's there in the official documents as well. And apart from that, I used, lot of academic sources, academic journal sources, and most of them were focused on China, Tibet's economic development. They were talking about, how Chinese development, which is often seen as a miracle, but it is not really very balanced. In a way that they're earlier in the Deng Xiaoping era, they thought that they would first develop the eastern part of China, then they will come to the western part of China, but somehow that planning didn't materialize in a way that they thought it would, and that resulted in the eastern part of China being way too developed than the western part of China. And, so. So yes, most of my reference regarding this have been on Chinese academic journals, and I could see a lot of emphasis among Chinese strategic community about how there is this lack of development, or how unsustainable Tibet's economic development is, and how it needs to be balanced by opening it up through in the western through the western region. But again, this particular aspect of Tibet's development challenges, you will never get to see in English language, English language articles or English language propaganda material, which is there, where China, I think, projects Tibet as an epitome of development in whole of South Asia. So this is a very different narrative that I saw when I, compared and contrasted the English language material on Tibet and the Chinese language material on Tibet. So that is one interesting aspect that I saw while researching on this project.
Thank you, Dr. Ghoshal. In fact, when you were mentioning about the Tibet as a important link to South Asia, it reminded me of some of the writings I had done in the past about when the BRI was being proposed and being popularized in the early 2013 or 14 period. So when these documents, the vision document were being brought out, I think you could look at those ones. It clearly talks about Tibet as being a very important bridge to South Asia, and then you could refer to these very important, I don't know whether I should call it important, but number of development forum meetings China has been organizing in Lhasa, and I think initially first they started that in Vienna or Italy somewhere, and then they continued. Subsequent iterations were held in Lhasa, and these meetings, if you follow their website, some of them are now redundant, some of them are still available, and statements by the participants of these meetings, they clearly talk about the potential of the Tibet region as a opening up as a gate to South Asia, or to the Yunnan and into South Asia. So these kind of discourses actually in the English language media have been present, and may not, I don't know, in the literature maybe not so much, but if you're following the events and these various so China's organizing various conferences and meetings on Tibet, and also bringing in scholars and journalists into Tibet, and then organizing various meetings there too. They are constantly talking about these the potential of the region. And if you've been following also as a part of the BRI, and as a part of opening up these various trading ports in the Tibetan border areas to Nepal, because into India that was not possible, so through Nepal there were a lot of these ports that they were opening up. So that would also, I think, give some cue into what has already been done in this domain. Yeah,
Yes.
that's about it. And so I
Yes, ma'am. What I was trying to say is, like the difference that I saw, and the striking difference that I saw, because earlier, just looking at the Chinese English language communication, it somehow comes out like Tibet as an epitome of development. So if you look at Chinese programs, when they take journalists, or when they take, say, researchers to Tibet, they showcase Tibet's development. They try to tell you that Tibet's development it's a development epitome. It's like at the top of development, if you look at the whole of South Asia. So that is the English language propaganda. But when you look at the Chinese discourse, you would see that there is a development challenge in Tibet, and that needs to be redressed through opening up Tibet to Western regions. So this is a totally different paradigm that we are seeing. So I was very, very surprised by what I saw in the Chinese literature, where the entire focus was on how unsustainable Tibet's development has been, you know. So I found that to be very different and very striking.
Thank you for that clarification. I think yes, I missed that point, and I think that's actually quite counterintuitive in that sense what you've encountered, and I think I would really like to look at those narratives as well.
Sure.
So
Thank you, ma'am.
yeah, um, so there are some questions. Suradeep, would you read out the questions? Okay, I think I could go to the chat box and look at the questions.
Okay.
So, so there is a question from Mahua Chakravarti,
Mhm.
and the question is: if China's long-term vision is to transform Tibet into a hub connecting China with South Asia and the Indian Ocean region, does this fundamentally alter the strategic significance of Tibet in India-China relations? And what policy choices should India prioritize over the next decade?
Okay. So, policy choices, I would say that first it is very important for us to understand, because there is so much of, gray area, as in like so much of information, misinformation. It is very difficult to figure out what exactly is, because again, going and researching in Tibet is out of bounds. So what we know about Tibet, or the information that we get about Tibet, is very it's not very complete, so I would say that our first effort should be to understand what is the situation in Tibet, or what is exactly happening in Tibet, or what China actually wants out of Tibet. So when I looked at the discussions that are happening within China, as I just mentioned, it was very different. They were talking about using Tibet as a gateway to develop their China's western regions, China's western provinces, and India being, I mean, as I just mentioned in my presentation, it has the longest border with Tibet. It is the largest market nearby. So it's become central to their Tibet policy. So if we do not understand this dynamic, how do you strategize so that any kind of agreement, or any kind of dealing with China is beneficial to both sides? Because we are under the impression, or most of us are under the impression, that Tibet is the epitome of development, and we can develop even further by cooperating with Tibet, or by our economy can develop by being by say engaging more deeply with Tibet. And I think in Nepal or in Bhutan, I think the same kind of perception exists, that their economy can benefit by cooperation with Tibet. But if we look at the Chinese strategy, they want to, of course, Nepal and Bhutan would anyway benefit by participating in China's re-export trade, where they use Indian market to re-export Chinese products and sell it over here. So they can benefit both way. But then for India, we need to think how we can benefit from, say, engaging in a better way with the Chinese side on the Tibet issue.
Thank you, ma'am. We have a comment from Dr. Devendra Kumar. He's saying that while economic developmentalism is an important part of China's approach to manage ethnic discontent among Tibetans, its functionality has changed after mid 2015 from the 7th Tibet Work Forum in 2015. Since then, belief that economic development alone can lead to the solution of the problems it faces is replaced with boosting grassroots state coercive capacity and using economic development to integrate Tibetans, especially in rural areas, in commercial economy. But how much foreign trade can add to this? As of now, it seems only Nepal has real potential for trade with Tibet. Can you please elaborate more on this, whether it is only aspirations to raise foreign trade profile or the objective is being realized?
See, as I mentioned, that there are two contradictions that exist in Tibet. First contradiction is, of course, the unsustainable or infrastructure-led development model that that have been built up for so many years. What they call the Tibetan economy is a dependency economy, and that China sees as the primary contradiction of Tibet, and that needs to be addressed first. The other contradiction is, of course, the religious ethnic tension, the Dalai Lama issue. So all these things are there, but the Chinese side sees it as secondary contradiction, and they believe that if the primary contradiction is addressed in a suitable way, then that will go a long way in addressing the secondary contradiction. So so the primary thing is to fix Tibet's economy. So for a very long time you would have heard that China talked about how Tibet is having this double digit growth and the huge development potential and all, but with Chinese economy facing headwinds as of now, the impact on the western region or the economies, like the Tibetan economy is huge, and that is one of the reasons why they have been coming up with this dam project, this huge dam project, which is going to be, I think, they are going to the belief is that it's going to create a lot of employment. It is going to have it is going to give a boost to Tibetan economy, which is surviving, which is kind of suffering because of the overall economic challenges that China is facing at this point in time. And the exports, of course, if you look at Chinese economy, export is the lifeline for Chinese economy as of now, because investments are not investment returns are not so good as of now, and consumption is has not picked up. So it is again exports, which is the lifeline of Chinese economy, and they do see Tibet as a re-export hub, from where it can use the Tibetan region as a re-export hub, and use the markets that is available, say in India and in the say in whole of South Asia. So that is the economic model that they are seeing, and that's why they are so keen on opening up Tibet. To the to particularly having this South Asia corridor through Tibet.
Thank you, ma'am. Our next question is from Ms. Soumya Soni, who is a research intern at ICS. Her question is, what sort of changes can opening up of Tibet bring at the societal level concerning the local traditional structure, economic opportunities, etc.?
Uh, of course, so as I mentioned, there are some key industries that they are focusing on, like energy, like tourism. These are basically the pillar industries that they are focusing on, and they are trying to build, on these industries. And so yes, these are the industries that they would like to build while opening up Tibet to South Asia. And mainly, their model is to have a re-export model where Tibet would be used as a hub, which will be which will there will be border trades, there will be border exchanges, and Indian market would be used as a base for development of Tibet and also the broader western region of China.
Thank you, ma'am. The next question is from Payal Jain, and this question is posed to both the speaker and the chair. Her question is, which primary and secondary sources are most useful for analyzing Chinese government policies and the motivations underlying them?
Okay, so all these sources make sense, as in, of course, the government documents and all, they are the most reliable ones, and we should use those as much as it's possible. But at the same time, to understand the Chinese public opinion, it's also very important to look at their social media, look at the buzz around, the public opinion, how the public opinion. And China is again a very in a way, it's very monitored society. So you will see that there is this kind of that the public opinion is not in vacuum. It does have a policy relevance. So what you see as a public opinion today, in say a week's time or a month's time, it becomes part of their policy making. Also, they have a lot of impact on policy making as well. So I think all the sources can be utilized to understand China in a better way, because there is a lot of propaganda. When you work on China, you see that there is a lot of propaganda material available, and that is exactly what China would want you to believe. But if you really want to work on primary sources, or if you really want to work on Chinese language sources, I think each source has its own value, and you can use it as your the research topic demands.
Thank you, ma'am. The next question is from Mr. Devashish Bari. He is a political science master student in DU. His question is, according to his observation, he found one specific trends that in the past, the powerful power or state always tried to prove their argument as a true argument through various ways, and they somehow able to do that. For example, democracy is popularized by American scholars. Westphalian says state system is the real state system, and so on. And his question is, should we start the specific argument in the scholars' discussion that Tibet is Buddhist state? Tibet had a sovereign past. Tibet was brutally invaded.
At the scholarly level, of course, officially nothing. I mean, officially you cannot talk on these issues. But then at the scholarly level, I think, I mean, sky is the limit. You can talk about anything and everything that you would like to explore. So I think at the scholarly level, I don't think there is any problem in discussing whatever you think is valid. Of course, it needs to be supported by relevant documents or relevant evidences, but you can talk about any and everything. And if you look at China, how Chinese scholars work on, in fact, on Kailash Mansarovar issue, there are so many Chinese scholars working on, on the aspect of to define that Kailash Mansarovar is not it's not a site for Hindu religion, but it is a site for China's native born religion. So they are working on that kind of topic. So I think, of course, it's a part of China's propaganda apparatus. But I think in our country, we do have that space of working on any subject or any argument that you want to work on, provided it is supported by evidence and it is supported by enough documentation.
Yes, so at present we have no more questions. Okay.
Oh, sorry, I got logged out. There's a question by Debashish. Has that been taken care of?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Anybody else who has any questions? Okay. So we are, I think, on good time. If I could pose the last question to Dr. Ghoshal, who's tried to bring in this very important and nuanced perspective as her abstract had. There is one question actually now that has come in, but I'll just try to complete. From your perspective, how much of a salience, I mean, you are looking at these primary materials and debates, and I think also in between, before I logged out, I also heard you talk about, and which is actually true, the discussions that go on in the public domain, especially among public intellectuals, they finally do find some space and place in the larger policy discourse or policy implementation, and sometimes they don't. For example, when it comes to Tibet policy, there was once a very, again, forward-looking, alternate view that came about, which was from a party school, central party school member. She talked about engaging with the Dalai Lama because of the time factor, and he has a more non-violent and peaceful approach, which is way, and does not talk about separation, and it's merely talking about autonomy. And that policy was not, that kind of a recommendation was not really picked up. But on the contrary, there was another debate about generally referred to as second generation ethnic reforms. And if we look at the latest ethnic unity law, and at that point of time when that kind of a debate came up, that was among famous Chinese scholar, Professor Ma Rong, and then there were a couple of others who were popularizing this view, and that was kind of picked up if you look at this latest ethnic unity law. So sometimes they find a place, sometimes they don't. And just to, also reiterate or recall what you've discussed, is what your primary finding is that there is a contrary to a popular understanding about China drumming its talking about how it has made so much of achievements and leapfrog development in Tibet. They're actually acknowledging that they face massive challenges in terms of these development approaches that it is following. It's creating dependency, and it's creating various challenges. As a result, it needs to open up. So this correlation that you're trying to make, and of what the correlation that they make, these intellectuals, right? So because these challenges are there now, we should open up. And also this suits the larger national policy, national economic policy, because of the larger global turmoil and the unbalanced regional development. So it works overall, it fits the larger picture. So let's open up Tibet, and this is going to be useful. And then you
Ma'am,
Okay, sir.
um, um,
can I respond? Can I respond? Can I respond? Hello.
Yes, ma'am, please.
Okay. I can respond, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so what I was about the Chinese language sources, and of course, some the discussions that we see as part of public opinion, some of it gets reflected in policy making. Some of them they do not. But at the same time, Chinese government, how they function in terms of communication that I have seen in the past few years is that it's like their industrial policy. Like they choose certain industries, and then the whole nation follows that. So there would be one discourse that is chosen by the government, and lot of Chinese scholars would be working on that discourse, that broader discourse. So but that is something very unique that I see while analyzing Chinese language literature. So there will be one common thread of thinking, and many scholars will be reiterating, or in a different in different forms, but they will be towing the same line. And that I find very different and very interesting, because very unique to how the discourse is formed within China. So I thought I'll just highlight that.
Thank you, ma'am. We have two more questions. One is from Professor Madhavi Thampi. She's asking that uh, thank you for this interesting talk, which shows us different kinds of discourse in China about Tibet. My question is, in the Chinese sources you have accessed, where do you find more support for the idea of opening Tibet to the Indian market?
Where do we find the idea? Is it a question?
Yeah, where do you find more support for the idea of opening Tibet to the Indian market?
I see a lot of support from the academic side. A lot of academic journals, academic discussions, and also, as I mentioned, in the policy papers, also, Chinese government policy papers, there also you will find a lot of mention about South Asia. Of course, they do not name directly India. That part you would see in academic discussions, but in policy documents, you will see a lot of mention of how how Tibet should open up to South Asia, how it should have a corridor, economic corridor through South Asia. There are various various strands of thinking. Some would say that Tibet should become a hub of all the three corridors that China had earlier planned: the CPEC, the China Myanmar corridor, and the maritime corridor that they had planned. So some of the writings would mention Tibet about as a hub of all these economic corridors. But in official government documents, you would definitely, if you just look at all the official government documents, there is mention of Tibet's opening up to South Asia, the South Asia corridor, the land and sea corridor. So these the mentions of these are very, very common in China's official documents as well, but most of them are in Chinese language, and they always mention South Asia. They do not name India for that matter. But when you look at the academic discourse or the academic debates or academic journals, there you see that by South Asia they actually mean India, because India is the biggest market in the region, and neither Nepal or Bhutan or Sri Lanka or Bangladesh can provide that kind of space for Tibet's development. So it is India that they talk about, but of course they would like to use other countries in the region. Like the example that I gave you about Nepal. So they would like to they would like to reroute and go through these countries, which has special economic arrangements with India. So they would like to leverage these countries to access the Indian market, rather than directly, getting into talks with India for, say, for example, I think a long time back we had talked about an FTA with China, long time back. So I think those sort of things are not going to happen anymore. But if you look at the Chinese writings, they understand that it is difficult to have India on board of BRI or to have a FTA with India. So their primary mode of operation is to work with other South Asian countries to build up pressure on India, which can then deliver to China what it wants.
Thank you, ma'am. The next question is from Mr. Rappai. He's asking that how much Pakistan and access to Indian Ocean figure in this issue.
How much?
Pakistan and access to Indian Ocean figure in this issue.
Pakistan's access to Indian Ocean?
Yes, ma'am. Pakistan and access to Indian Ocean figure in.
On the Tibet issue, I have seen, many of Chinese scholars put Tibet as a part of or as a hub for CPEC and all. But then, if you see it right now, CPEC itself is facing a lot of trouble, and in recent materials that I saw, I didn't see mention of Tibet as a part of CPEC. I saw in some of the documents, but those are from say 2015, 16, those time, but in present documents, I do not see mention of Tibet as part of CPEC, or I mean, in fact, the entire enthusiasm in China on CPEC has somehow, I mean, it has died down to a certain extent, because, the CPEC has not been, it couldn't be implemented as a way that they had envisaged. And also the aspect of, Chinese citizens being subjected to terrorist attacks, that is something which has been creating a lot of concern in Chinese side. And also the security situation in Pakistan, which is another aspect which is kind of increased the operation cost of Chinese companies in CPAC. And all those things have made that the earlier enthusiasm that I saw in Chinese writings about CPEC, I see that somehow missing in present times. I do not see that kind of enthusiasm still there with CPEC. And again, Tibet from that perspective is again, I do not see it so much these days. But in earlier papers, I did see Tibet's role as a central hub for all the three corridors that they had planned.
Thank you, ma'am. We have a raised hand from Professor Acharya. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Yeah, thanks, Supradeep. So it was really, really quite interesting listening to your talk, Ramthan, to persuade you to come and make this presentation. My apologies. I missed briefly. Somebody came urgently for signatures. I had to leave, so I'm not too sure whether I will be overlapping with some of the things you said. But I have slightly, macro kind of an issue, which I would like you to speak about. One, that if we are indeed seeing a shift in terms of a willingness to consider Indian markets being accessible to Tibetans, which would mean that there would be obviously border trading posts, and that has in the past led to a consolidation of sorts. So, in other words, this is an indirect way of actually demarcating certain borders and boundaries and so on through this means. But in any case, the idea of the Indian market having access or the Tibetans having access would mean that there is a slight shift in the perception of India vis-a-vis the Tibet question in China, which basically is whether the Chinese are not as concerned, let us say, if that's proper word, but maybe some other word, as concerned about Indian intentions towards Tibet. If we go back, this was the big thing, that their worry was that India was either aligning with imperial interests or becoming a cat's paw for the other extra-regional powers, or simply undermining the Chinese control. Now, are they therefore more sanguine on all those three counts and therefore taking this kind of a shift? Because I don't think it is just a view of scholars. It will also be part of the policy that they are now seeking to bring into place. So does that therefore mean that actually we are looking for a more relaxed Tibet question between India and China, which was one of the real sore points? I mean, this is the larger issue that I'm saying, that are we seeing the beginning of a shift of the Tibet question between India and China? That's really, so I would just want a sense from you on that.
Ma'am, I would say that, do China have any less concern from India on the Tibet issue? I don't think so. I mean, it still has a lot of concern. Like I mentioned about a recent article that I did on Kailash Mansarovar and the yatra that started last year, I guess. And they have been, and if you look at the Chinese internet, if you look at even certain, reputed scholars, how they were reacting to the starting of yatra was very, weird in a way, because there was a lot of negative comments about India is trying to create a fait accompli. It is trying to have its own cultural sovereignty on these regions. So I think, the concerns are not less, but then Tibet's development, as China is increasingly finding it out, is that Tibet's development is not possible in a closed way that it has done for so many years. And it needs to, because again, the eastern part of China is way far away from Tibet, and Tibet's closest ports would again be India, and it would be, I think, Calcutta or somewhere in India, and it's the biggest market that is there closest to Tibet again remains in India. So what Chinese strategy that I see is that, well, access to Indian market is very important for development of Tibet, but they would like to, they would like to use the complicated ties between India and various other South Asian nations as a bargaining chip to achieve what they want to achieve regarding Tibet, that is access to Indian market through these other countries, through by using the economic arrangements that are there between these countries, between the South Asian countries and India. By leveraging those things, they would like to access the Indian market. So it would never be, I mean, it is not like they do not have any concern or worry about India in terms of the Tibet issue. They do have serious concerns and worries, but it is just imperative for Tibet to, if Tibet has to develop, or Tibet has to, move away from the dependency economy that it has at this point in time, it has to factor in the, Indian market. And that is a necessity. And that's why they are doing it. But they're doing it in a very, intelligent way, in using South Asian countries as a tool to access Indian market.
Thanks. I think that's a potentially fascinating area to look at. I mean, what you are basically suggesting is that they are confident enough now to expand the framework within which China is seeking to bring Tibet into the developmental paradigm. So that would point both to a greater degree of confidence about their ability to control whatever interaction or engagement, and also confidence in their ability to use what you are suggesting, South Asian countries to act as a kind of influence on the way in which this process goes on. So I think this is something to be explored. It's really fascinating. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am.
We have another comment from Mr. Rappai. He is saying that it's possible that China is reassessing its military strategy.
Military strategy is in Tibet as Tibet's role in China's military strategy?
Ma'am, it is not written down. Yeah.
So I would say that no, I mean, it's as I just mentioned, the concerns that China has regarding India's role in the Tibet issue. I don't think there is any, that concern has died down, or of course, China is more confident than ever. But at the same time, I think Tibet as an outpost, or Tibet as a security for China's access to Indian market, that is not changing anytime soon. So the development that Tibet would make, that would also add on to, building more, the military strength of Tibet. The economic factor will add on to the military strength of Tibet. So using Tibet as a military outpost, I don't think that's going to change anytime soon.
We have other comments.
Dr. Antara, just one more point to add to Alka ma'am's comments. I think I mean, this is a very positive development if it were to be materialized, right? And I think what ma'am highlighted also about it also reflects a China which is increasingly becoming more confident and more assured about its position and place in Tibet. And a lot of the ground realities does not speak to it, but the debates that you are referring to kind of indicates that they are or a section of the community, the intellectual community in China, feels that they're ready to now open up, right? But the ground reality
Yes,
is in terms of tourism. If you're expecting tourism, if you're expecting trade or economic exchanges, it requires a lot of mobility, people to people movement, travel of goods, travel of services. That would require a lot of mobility, and that is restricted not just within South Asia to Tibet or around the world into Tibet, but within Tibetan areas and Tibet itself. Right. So in terms of how they're going
absolutely.
to enact it, I'm not sure those are reflected in the debates. So usually debates begin from, they just, begin as conjectures, and then if it's picked up and maybe they're going to go into the details. So the devil would be in the details, of course. But
Absolutely. But
I
you
also
know
wanted
what I
to
found?
bring out
So I was saying
another
that.
dimension actually I wanted to bring about.
Please,
Sorry,
please,
please go
please,
ahead.
please go ahead.
My network is very bad, so I'm just, there is a time lag in terms of following your, yeah.
Go ahead, Antara. Go ahead. I think she's
Uh,
through.
Yeah.
Respond to that.
Okay, so what I was trying to say is that there is this debate that is going on that I mentioned in my presentation, that is it the right time for Tibet to open up? So there is this confusion within in Chinese strategic community as well. But then the counter argument is that when would be the right time to open up Tibet? Because for Tibet's development, access to Indian market, access to Indian ports is absolutely essential. So, when they came up with the BRI, actually all these debates were happening around BRI, and a lot of people were concerned that is it like you just mentioned, that are they more confident that they are talking about opening up Tibet? This kind of debates are the intense debates have been happening within a Chinese strategic community. And one argument is that with the Belt and Road initiative there, with all the with the central government giving such a big push, it's an opportunity for Tibet, and it should just grab it, because there will never be an ideal time or an ideal situation to open up Tibet. So that is one argument. The other argument again is more concerned about the security aspect of it, and they are of the opinion that Tibet should be first integrated more deeply with China's internal, domestic market, and only after it is very strongly integrated with China's domestic market, then only it should focus on foreign trade and foreign exchanges, and then after that it can venture into, or it can open up in a more calibrated manner. So that is another argument, or that I could see. But yes, the concerns are there, but they also see that with the Belt and Road there's the ideal opportunity, or the best opportunity that Tibet should encash on.
Additional point that I was actually trying to also, from a researcher's perspective, I think this opens up a lot of interesting areas for us to further look at. If China is talking about opening up Tibet as a bridge to South Asia, which was part of the whole Belt and Road initiative discourse, right? So at that point of time, when I was writing about it, when I was researching on it, so I did not continue on it, but the one question I had raised was about how much are the Tibetan local people going to be a stakeholder in this, development opening up process? Because when these ports are being built up, and which were connecting to Nepal, much of it was, stuff or products and goods coming from the coastal, the mainland China, right? These are, so you said, you talked about the export potential. So are these goods being, are the Tibetans producing something that can be exported? Otherwise, the contradiction that you mentioned, there's a primary contradiction, and then there's a secondary contradiction, which is going to, the primary is going to take care of the secondary. If the Tibetans are not going to participate or partake in this economic development process, then the secondary contradiction is not going to be taken care of in that sense, right? So there is that catch. I think this is something we'll have to look at in terms of the actual empirical data, because as far as the people who are working from a political economy perspective, the economic perspective, their understanding is that there is not much industrial production or
True.
much happening within Tibet itself.
Absolutely.
So
And that
it's
comes
going
out
to be a
very
great
clearly
resource.
in Chinese writings as well. That there is the production, there isn't much happening inside Tibet. And the job opportunities and all, most of the people would be leaving. And that's, I mean, one of the reasons why they are coming up with these, settlements, because nobody wants to live there. Everybody wants to go to a bigger city and, live in a bigger city in a better climatic condition and all. So there is a lot of migration also happening from Tibet, and what China is trying to do is like reverse migration, take people from mainland and tell them to settle in those areas. But then again, the job prospects or the opportunities, economic opportunities, are not really there. So these people, these Han people mostly, who they relocate to these areas, they also come there as migratory birds. So they just come for the tourist season, they make some money, and they go back again to wherever they are settled in some other parts of China. So that is a concern over there, that the economic opportunity, unless there is proper economic exchanges, proper border trade, proper China is building all the infrastructure that is possible to be made for that kind of a, I mean, it's working on basis that vision that it has, that there will be border exchanges, there will be trade, there will be people will migrate, people will be more interested in living in these areas. So it is working with, like, that vision in mind. But then the implementation part is again, it's very open ended actually.
Okay, I
Maybe, I
think there are
mean,
some
what I see is like,
questions.
I think they believe that the time is in their side, so they're willing to wait it out, till, like I mentioned in my presentation also, the idea of opening up Tibet, or idea of having this land sea corridor, it has been there since 2000s. In 1989 also, each time there is some, I mean, the idea was always there, but then there would be some problem. They will again, put that idea in the back burner, and again there would be some new initiative. Then again, they will talk about opening up of Tibet. So particularly after the starting of Belt and Road Initiative, this the corridor through South Asia for Tibet, it became a big discussion point, after the Belt and Road Initiative. But the idea, the basic idea has always been there, but it only gets it gets taken up more intensely at certain point in time. And Belt and Road had to be one of those important times when there was, I mean, a lot of people started talking about Tibet's role in Belt and Road, and how Tibet can form this, land sea corridor through India.
Thank you, Dr. Antara. I think we're reaching the end of our time. Is there any more question?
Yes, ma'am. We have two more questions from Dr. Partham Mukhopadhyay. Uh, Two last questions. As the
After
transition to
that,
a
I
new
think
Dalai, yeah. As the transition to a new Dalai Lama approaches, has the government attitude to the public practice of religion on the ground changed in any way? And the second question is, given the rail connectivity within China, why is India still relevant as a market?
Okay, the first question about Dalai Lama. See, I my study is mostly on China's internal discourse, so I look at China's discourse analysis. But as I mentioned, that it's again a very their internet is a very monitored internet and very restricted internet. So I barely find discussion on religious matters, particularly on the Dalai Lama issue. So I do not think it would be right for me to comment on what exactly is the Chinese thinking on the Dalai Lama issue, because I have not seen much academic discussion or social media discussion on this particular issue. So that's one. And the second is, why would Indian market be relevant? Well, sir, you know about Chinese economy and what is happening in Chinese economy. Are they really, I mean, what is the situation of Chinese economy right now? The consumption has not picked up. The investment led growth that they were focusing on, that is again not delivering anymore. It is only exports that is the lifeline for Chinese economy as of now. They have a trade surplus of 1.2 trillion US dollars. And so exports and external markets are critical for China at this point in time. They have been talking about reorienting their economy, shifting to consumption-led, development. But if you look at it, nothing really has worked out. And it's increasingly becoming evident that export-led growth is what is primarily driving Chinese economy. And that is why, China is getting into trouble with I mean, not just with India, with many other countries. You see what is happening at US-China front, the trade war, the tariff war, and every other day you will have this news of US putting restriction on some Chinese company. The same is happening with EU. Every other week there is a new regulation. They're talking about China Shock 2.0. They're talking about how Chinese overcapacity is kind of devastating their industry. They're coming up with, regulations one after another. The same thing has happened with us also. We have also introduced certain restrictions on Chinese investments, Chinese companies, Chinese exports. So, it is Chinese economy is in a lot of pressure right now, and which makes external markets particularly important for China. And if Tibet has to be developed, you mentioned about railways that they have constructed, but then those railways, Chinese consumption is just not there. Who is going to consume? Who is going to, they're just making products. Who is going to consume it? So for consumption, they need, bigger markets. And which is the biggest market nearer to Tibet? It is the Indian market. So that makes, India particularly important in China's Tibet policy. And through my presentation, I just wanted to highlight that. And when they write South Asia, they actually mean the Indian market. But of course, they would. I mean, they have other livers, and those livers are the other South Asian countries. So they would like to use those countries' influence as a bargaining chip to get access to Indian market. So I think that I don't know if that answers your question. I think today only China's retail sales, the data about China's retail sales came out, and you just can take a look at it. Like everything is negative over there. So the consumption part has really gone down very badly in China in recent years, particularly. Lot of negative public sentiment in China about the prospect of China's economy, in the sense that they have huge trade surplus, but then the public sentiment is particularly negative about the prospect of Chinese economy. And there is a lot of concern that it might push China into a military conflict with somebody or the other.
Thank you, Dr. Antara. I think the amount of time that has been taken for this presentation just goes to show the amount of interest that is there on the topic, and your own interventions have been very, very important. And I think also this gives us a lot of food for thought. I think the issue is not settled, and these debates are, as you say, raging inside Tibet and inside China, and until it becomes policy, and how participative it is, and that kind of a caveat still remains. So with that, I think we'll have to consider the various options and opportunities that are there in terms of this opening. And with that, I think I will not take much time. We will, I think, go ahead and wrap up. If you have any closing comments, otherwise I think we can end our session today.
Not much, but I think you're right. It is very difficult to understand the participation, like you mentioned about the Tibetan national, I mean, the Tibetan people within Tibet. Those are very difficult data to get hold of, because there is no way you can get access to that kind of data. And as an Indian scholar on China, it is even more difficult for us to get access to Chinese data, So that remains a concern. And I will be very happy if, ICS or, we can figure out, we can brainstorm and see how we can get better access to Chinese data and better access to China's thinking process. So I think that will make our task way easier, and it will help us understand China better, and our strategy will also improve from there. So I
Definitely.
will be very happy if ICS can help us a bit on this, how to go about it.
Yes, I think Alka ma'am is listening to that. Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Antara, and thank you to the audience for being so patient and for all your very important questions. And thank you for the opportunity to chair the session also. Thank you to the speaker. And I think with that, we wrap up. And anything else the organizers would have to say? Otherwise, we could end the session.
I think Professor Acharya wants to say something. Ma'am?
No. I just wanted to say thank you. And yes, you've certainly given us food for thought, and we shall be engaging with you on this further. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Chair. With this, we come to an end of today's seminar. We thank Dr. Antara Gosal Singh and Dr. Shering Chonzom Bhutia for gracing today's seminar with their presence and for giving us their precious time. We also thank the audience for joining us today. The video of today's seminar shall be available on the ICS's YouTube channel. Details about the events can be found on the ICS website, or you can also subscribe to our newsletter for regular updates. Thank you everyone for joining us today.